To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. Welcome to the show. Sunny day in Cleveland, not too bad. High 60s today, but guess what? We'll take it because this is Cleveland. We're waiting for this thing to just break totally. I'm waiting for it to break totally so you can just chill out, get some of that good raw, and stir up that vitamin D to make you feel good. Because living in this northern hemisphere, African Americans have issues with not enough sun, and vitamin D is critical to the body. Over, they say, hundreds of ailments can stem from a lack of vitamin D alone. But do our doctors tell us about that? That is the question. So that's why you need to know your physiology and your makeup. I just want to remind you guys that the Inner City Juneteenth Coalition, along with the Carter G. Woodson Project, is hosting that annual Juneteenth affair in downtown Cleveland. That's the last Saturday of June, the 29th. Y'all come on out and support. It's the original Juneteenth celebration downtown. We didn't have to get permission from nobody to do it. We've been doing it 10, 12 years. So come on out and show your support. You can give me a call if you want to be a vendor. You want to just come on down and patronize us, and you want to be in the parade. I also want to remind you, too, the 23rd of June, we're going to be at the Mediterranean with the Motherland Connection, Touch and Taste of Africa ball. Come on out there and show your wares. You dust off that old dashiki that you got in the closet that you ain't worn in a while, and come on out and partake in some West African food as well. So we had a great time last year. Make sure you come on out this time. You don't want to miss it. So give me a call, 216-323-6155, 216-323-6155. And in the remote studio, we got our good brother Vince. What's going on, Vince?
Just a quick update on Larchmere Arts. We're going to have a jam session there this evening. It's not one that everybody in Cleveland is going to show up for, but I've invited a few musicians to come and I guess have fellowship this evening. So we're going to play some music. I've got a drummer that's coming in. We've got a few horn players, a couple of guitarists. So we're looking to have a good time tonight. So
I'm coming to bring my drum, man. No,
come on, man. Bring your drum. We got a couple of vocalists as well. I'm really excited about today's show. It is a continuation of the show that we did last week. We were privileged to have with us Brother Michael Imhotep. And I got to tell you, bro, I had to listen to the broadcast again. I had 3 hours to kill on my ride back from Chillicothe from Mother's Day. So I just put the show on and I listened, and I was just, again, to use the term that I used last week, I was blown away by what we learned. So I got my pen, I got some paper. I'm going to be taking some notes, and I just want the listening audience and the viewing audience to prepare themselves for the history lesson that they are going to get today. I don't want to read the whole bio, but I do want to give folks a sense of who this brother is. Michael Imhotep is the founder of the African History Network and the host of the African History Network show, which you can see at, I guess it's Sundays. Right. And this could be wrong, so I'll let you correct that. But I do know that you have been on 9:10 a.m., the Superstation, WFDF in Detroit. You're a historian, radio show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer, and you have been a panelist on the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily digital show that airs online. And you also have a YouTube channel, so you've got a nice footprint in the digital world, and you're doing what you can to bring folks up to date with history, and also you deal with current events. Today we're going to talk about our brother Malcolm X in light of the fact that tomorrow is the anniversary of his birth. We're also going to talk about the good brother, Dr. Martin Luther King, because as we said last week, as Dr. King's life evolved, he was getting closer and closer to being in alignment with what Brother Malcolm was bringing. And I'm sure you can give us some insight on that. So with all that said, welcome to 360 Info Network, brother.
Hey, thanks for having me back again, brothers. How y'all doing today?
Okay, good.
And we're live on the radio now too, right?
We're live on WERE AM 1490 WERE, and we are also streaming live to Facebook and YouTube. I guess Brother Imhotep, we're streaming live to your audience, and Brother Antonio, the Journey with Antonio on YouTube, streaming live to that platform, and we're also on 2 different Facebook channels as well. So we got a lot of the bases covered, and we definitely want to get the word out, to folks who don't know the things that we are going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And also, before we get into the discussion, I want to let everybody know, visit my website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. More information is about me there and the online history classes that I teach, because I'll be teaching one today, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But, brother, this is a very important discussion. This is the May 19th will be the 99th birthday of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X. And Malcolm X was a revolutionary. He is a very much misunderstood figure in African-American history, as well as world history, if you actually understand the trajectory of Malcolm's life, especially Malcolm after he officially separates from the Nation of Islam, March 8th, 1964. As we talked about on last week's show, toward the end of both of their lives, their ideologies were converging. So it wasn't a situation where Dr. King was moving closer toward Malcolm's ideology. Malcolm's ideology was moving closer toward Dr. King's as well. And one of the best books for decades that dealt with this convergence of their ideologies was this one here by James H. Cone, Martin, Malcolm, and America, or a Dream or a Nightmare. Martin, Malcolm, and America, a Dream or a Nightmare. And I read this back in 1994. When I was in college. We know James H. Cone was known as the father of Black liberation theology. And we see that Malcolm gets involved in the civil rights movement. He joins the civil rights movement when he leaves the Nation of Islam. And when he met Dr. King for the first and only time, March 26, 1964, he tells Dr. King, "I'm throwing all of my effort into the heart of the civil rights movement." Now, they only met for a couple of minutes, but when we look at Malcolm's actions after that and the trajectory after that, we see him getting involved in the civil rights movement. We see in his Ballad of the Bullet speeches, he delivers it March 29th, 1964, the Audubon Ballroom in Washington Heights, New York. April 3rd, 1964, Corey Methodist Church in Cleveland, Ohio, and then April 12th, 1964, at the historic King Solomon Baptist Church here in Detroit, where I have spoken 3 or 4 times. He talks about interjecting Black nationalism into the civil rights movement and radicalizing the civil rights movement. Okay, he does this in the speeches. And then we know he forms the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And when you read his speech, June 28th, 1964, which is called By Enemies Necessary, that's what it's ostensibly called, By Enemies Necessary. He's announcing the formation, officially announcing the formation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity and their 5-plank platform. And one of those platforms was dealing with politics and political education. And he talks about registering African Americans in Harlem, New York as independents. Okay. So when he leaves the nation, he really emphasizes the need for control of the politics in your community, in addition to controlling the economics and the education in your community. But he also talks about the importance of voting and voting strategically and being an educated voter, as opposed to just voting for a D or an R.
That's really interesting when you talk about the importance of voting. There are some folks in the conscious community that kind of push back and say that, everything is manipulated and it's a waste of your time. You don't really have a vested interest in the political system. I'm sure that you would disagree with that. Could you talk more about the importance of engagement in the political process through voting?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we have to understand that politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay, so voting is only one small part of politics, but it's a very, very important part of politics. When we saw the video that came out on May 17th, 2024, of the argument in a House of Representatives Oversight Committee between Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Okay, the reason why, and you saw Representative Cromer, James Cromer of Kentucky, who is the chair of that committee, who didn't even understand the committee rules. The reason why Republicans only got 27 bills passed in the House of Representatives in 2023, the reason why they have not passed a budget, and they are constitutionally mandated to pass a budget. So we know that the White House submits a budget to Congress. There are 12 appropriation subcommittees in both the House and the Senate, and we know that the House of Representatives is constitutionally mandated to pass a budget that the White House sends to them. The reason why we're on, I think it's our third continuing resolution. The reason why Republicans can't pass a budget is because they don't know how to govern. This is the chaos caucus. Well, the reason why they were able to take control of the House is because it came down to about 7,000 votes and a handful of races. Lauren Boebert of Colorado, she won her race on recount by about 546 votes. Razor thin margins. That's the difference between Representative Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, who led the charge in the House of Representatives to push the big lie, okay, to push the stolen election lie. That's the difference between him being Speaker of the House of Representatives and Representative Hakeem Jeffries being Speaker of the House of Representatives. When you look at what they were able to accomplish, say in the first 2 years of the Biden-Harris administration, they got a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan passed that saved the economy. You've had 15 million jobs that have created 15 million plus jobs. 2.6 million of those jobs went to African Americans. Last time I checked, that was 17% and with 13.5% of the population. You have the fastest growth rate of African American owned businesses right now under the Biden-Harris administration. You have the lowest unemployment rate in 2023 since 1972, since the unemployment rate was calculated by race. Okay, so when we look at policies that they have been able to get passed, and then you look at what's happened since Republicans have taken control of the House of Representatives, you see a stark difference. And you see obstructionists, everything from the attack on critical race theory, that's dealing with politics. I talk about how Donald Trump, September 2020, there was a memo, there was an executive order he actually did that banned using critical race theory when it came to training federal employees. This is what really unleashed this whole critical race theory backlash, which then we see codified into policy coming out of Florida, attacking the advanced placement social studies standards when it comes to African American history. And we see other attacks on African American history throughout, especially these former Confederate states. So all of this deals with politics. So what we have to understand, I deal with a principle that I created called political self-defense. We have to understand whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans, whose policies will do the least amount of harm, who will create an environment for us to push our agenda the farthest and get the most accomplished. Now, for you to have an agenda, you have to understand history, economics, law, and politics. All these people out here talking about they want a politician to give them a black agenda. A black agenda is what we give the politicians, not what we ask them to give us. But you have to understand history, economics, law, and politics to be able to put together a reasonable agenda that can actually be enforced. You have to understand law and also who will protect gains that have already been made. We talked about this on Roland Martin Unfiltered yesterday. The overturning of Roe versus Wade, which deals with women's reproductive rights. This goes way beyond just abortion rights. This deals with women's reproductive rights. The striking down of affirmative action when it comes to college admissions. Okay, all this deals with the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court that Donald Trump was able to put in place, which goes back to the 2016 presidential election. He got three conservative Supreme Court justices confirmed. Okay, and he got 226 federal judges confirmed. These are lifetime appointments. The judicial branch of the federal government interprets law from the legislative branch of the federal government. So when President Joe Biden did his executive order to forgive student loan forgiveness, which would have impacted about 40 million Americans, especially African Americans, and it would have moved 500,000 African American families from a negative net worth to a positive net worth, it was Donald Trump's 6-3 conservative court that struck that down and said it was unconstitutional. Now, so the people in 2016 who said they weren't voting for Hillary Clinton because they didn't like that witch, they didn't understand what the alternative was, which was Donald Trump, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, which were two right-wing conservative think tanks who gave Trump lists of federal judge nominees and names for the Supreme Court, this is where they came from. Okay, so we have to understand political self-defense, how all these dots are connected, and how to defend against this, how to play offense and defense at the same time. And many of us don't understand the dots exist in the first place.
You know, just flashing back to 2015, 2016 in the political season, I remember there were some who were saying that the most critical issue about the election of the 45th president of the United States was the impact that you mentioned on the court system and the appointments that he was able to make, yes, irrespective of the economic measures that he was promoting, irrespective of his whole idea of draining the swamp and all that. You know, there were people who were saying we have to be concerned about this because he will have an ability to put those judges in place. And as you just expressed to us, that's exactly what happened. I looked at a video that you posted on your Facebook channel a few weeks ago that featured the vice president talking about basically an economic stimulus package for the Black community. But I also know that, you know, election cycle after election cycle, we talk about how the Democrat Party has taken the needs of Black people for granted. Do you think that outside of the fact that this isn't an election year and politicians are going to say the things that they think are necessary to be said to get them elected, and then, you know, the election happens and then things kind of fall apart and they renege on their promises? Do you think that this is a repeat of that phenomenon in our election season?
Oh, not at all. They were basically talking about what has already been accomplished. When you look at it, $16 billion invested in HBCUs. You look at the fastest growth rate for African-American small businesses. You look at the median household net worth of African-Americans increasing 60% under the Biden-Harris administration. Largely what she was talking about were things that have already happened, what they've been doing. Now, there are two dynamics to this. Number one, we have to do a better job of reading and getting political news, number one, because I read articles. There was one a few months ago from the Washington Post, and it was interviewing African-American men from the Metro Detroit area, and they were saying they weren't voting for Joe Biden. One of the people interviewed said, you know, if they could give all this money to Ukraine, they could figure out that student loan issue and student loan forgiveness. They didn't talk about the fact that the Biden-Harris administration had already forgiven at that point about $140 billion about $140 billion when it came to student loan forgiveness. One. Two, they didn't talk about how his executive order was blocked in the Supreme Court by the 6-3 conservative Supreme Court that I just mentioned. So a lot of times, one of the principles of political self-defense that I teach is understanding how to remove the obstructionists, right? So people talk about, for instance, well, we didn't get the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Yeah, but it was Senator Tim Scott, the Black Tea Party Republican for South Carolina. He's the one who blocked the bill in the Senate after it passed the House of Representatives. No Republicans in the House of Representatives voted. That vote was 220 to 212. Go to congress.gov and go back to March 2021. That's when the bill passed the House of Representatives. Congress.gov, for those that don't know, that is the official website where you can go read all these bills that are being proposed in Congress that passed the House, passed the Senate. And most importantly, you can see who voted for the bill and who voted against the bill, congress.gov. Now, you can only vote for your one member of the House of Representatives. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives. You can only vote for your 2 members of the U.S. Senate. If you're member of the House and your 2 members of the Senate, overwhelmingly, the majority of the time, keep voting for bills that you care about and want, why would you let them get voted out of office? Okay, so if you don't live in West Virginia, you can't vote for Joe Manchin. If you don't live in Georgia, you can't vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene or vote her out. But you can pay attention to who represents you in your congressional district and your and in the Senate. Okay, so one, we have to do a better job of understanding politics and getting political news. 1. 2, the Biden-Harris administration, they are doing better now than, say, the first 1 or 2 years in communicating what has already been accomplished. But they have a fantastic record. They have a fantastic story. And I always tell people to go to whitehouse.gov, because I'm just at whitehouse.gov right now looking at the announcement. Biden-Harris administration announces record over $16 billion in support for historically Black colleges and universities. This is after a record amount was allocated to HBCUs in 2021, $5.8 billion. Okay, but go to whitehouse.gov, which is the official website of the White House, and read their fact sheet, which deals with how the policies of the Biden-Harris administration are helping the African-American community. The last time it was updated, February 27, 2023, it was 36 pages when I printed it out. And they take you through category by category. Now, overwhelmingly, most of those policies are voted against by Republicans, one, or they are totally against them. Like, Republicans are against student loan forgiveness. Okay. And then you have 5 Republicans in the Senate, including Mitt Romney, who try to get a bill passed to strip President Biden of the ability to forgive student loans. So this is about self-preservation for African Americans. And the policies that are good for African Americans are good for America in general.
Well, you know, it's interesting as we have this conversation and we look at the impact that the World Economic Forum wants to have on a global economy. We look at the possibility of the implementation of central bank digital currencies. You brought up legislation. I know that there are some pro-crypto bills that are going through the House and the Senate right now. And what's interesting is that you have bipartisan support, but you also had Executive Order 14067, I believe, and it was a bill that it was an executive order that the president used to advance the study of cryptocurrency. So now the Republicans are seeing that with the movement of assets from the previous model to the new model, because now we're talking about digitizing and tokenizing assets. We've got companies like BlackRock who have been successful in obtaining an ETF for Bitcoin. They're also looking at, in the very near future, an ETF for Ethereum. We're seeing a massive transfer of wealth from those who don't have it to those who do have it, those who have an interest in maintaining it. The mantra of the World Economic Forum is you will own nothing and be happy, which is why I found it so ironic that the vice president was talking about providing these $25,000 down payment assistant products to people who are interested in obtaining homes. But really, the global agenda is that no one will own a home. We're looking at this whole idea of 15-minute cities. They're trying to bring folks together in urban locations, pushing folks away from living in rural areas. So there are a lot of things that are going on a global scale. And I think last week we also talked about the BRICS and the impact that that's going to have on our economy. The reason that I mentioned to you in our conversations about what we talk about today is that this whole shift, this digital shift, it's in progress right now. And if we don't get a handle on it, we're going to be on the outside looking in when it comes to home ownership, when it comes to ownership of commodities in general. It's really critical that we know there's a new realm in terms of intellectual property. It's called non-fungible tokens, NFTs. These things, right, they're being rolled out as we speak. So I know that you have that master's in business administration and everything. I
have a bachelor's degree in business administration. I've been studying business for 30 years. I have probably had the equivalent to a master's, but I've taught entrepreneurship for 7 years. But yeah, go ahead.
Right. Well, you know, entrepreneurship is definitely critical to the success of our race. You know, Brother Hamptonio and I talk about this all the time. You know, integration was one of the worst things that happened in our community because somehow we got the idea that the white man's ice was colder than ours. You know, we started shopping at their stores instead of shopping at our own. I mean, you look at a place like Glenville, you know, you referenced the speech that was given by Malcolm X on, I believe, I think you mentioned it was April 3rd.
Yeah, in Cleveland. Yeah, Corey Methodist Church in Cleveland. Yes.
Which is right down the street from where I live. I could literally walk to Corey Methodist Church in
Sure.
about 10 or 15 minutes. But that area of Cleveland was an area that was thriving with Black business. And after you had the uprisings of Huff and the Glenville uprising, then there was this paradigm shift. And what happened was we kind of got immersed in this idea that we could shop at their stores, and we closed our own. And so we lost the entrepreneurial edge that we had. You know, it's really kind of ironic, Michael, that we had this diminishing of Black business, and at the same time you had a diminishing of the Black family statistically in certain ways, because historically Black folks were the ones that were getting married and staying married, you know, and then after this happened, you know, things kind of fell apart, to quote Chinua Achebe.
Yeah, a few things here. So, number one, the real fight during the civil rights movement was not for integration, it's for desegregation. Okay, when we actually understand the history, we wanted full access, we wanted equal access, we wanted all of our rights now. We wanted first-class citizenship, because after we had fought in all the wars, after we fought in World War I, after we fought in World War II, when you look at what those brothers were fighting for when they came back home after World War I, they were called the New Negro. Okay, they were fighting for first-class citizenship. They were fighting against the lynchings. They were fighting for federal anti-lynching bills, things of this nature. When we look at the way the story is told post-history is that we just stopped shopping at our stores. That's why they closed. But when you do a deep analysis of that, that may be a contributing factor here and there. But what gets left out is the U.S. Interstate Highway Acts of 1952 and 1956 that drove 41,000 miles of interstate highways all across the country. They ran throughout 1,600 African-American communities, displaced about 1 million people, wiped out a lot of our businesses, wiped out a lot of our homes. Secondly, what you also had was you had a disruption when it came to cooperatives that we had going back into the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, et cetera. Because a lot of and we talked about this last week, if people read the book Collective Courage by Dr. Jessica Gordon Emhart, which deals with our history engaged in cooperative economics, the co-ops that we had, whether it was the Colored Merchants Association in 1928, the Colored Farmers Union in the 1880s in Texas, which grew to 1.2 million people. The Colored Farmers Union had to be disbanded after 5 years because of death threats that they were getting and violence inflicted upon them. So we had two main dynamics, well, maybe three main dynamics. One, you had a disruption in our communities, which was called Negro removal, okay, or urban renewal, or Negro removal, which disrupted our communities. Okay, one. Two, you also have what's taking place when we shift from what I call the cooperative model, and then many of us had good intentions, but a lot of us started learning white business principles, either at white business schools or possibly at HBCUs that taught white business principles. And we started bringing those white business principles and a white capitalistic idea. We started bringing those into the African-American community, getting away from the cooperative model. Okay. And even though you can learn some positive things in white business schools, there's some positive things you can learn. But when we deal with how we were able to succeed economically, historically, it was through the cooperative model, where you have groups of people who are owners of the entity, as opposed to, say, a sole proprietorship or even an LLC where you may have 2 or 3 people. So it's and also the purpose of the businesses as well is different. So with the cooperative model, the purpose is to provide services really for the community, to empower the community, as opposed to trying to create the next millionaire, things like this. If you create a millionaire, that's fine, but you're really putting the people ahead, the needs of the people ahead of individual gains. So when you have those dynamics, now you talked about the decline in the family, right? Well, yes, we have very high marriage rates, and you had Candace Owens putting out this myth and other people saying that, it was the President Lyndon Johnson and fighting against poverty and welfare and things like this that caused a decline in the family. That's not true. First of all, if you look at King versus Smith, 1968 U.S. Supreme Court case, that outlaw was called the man in the house rule, dealing with the welfare laws at the state level, not the federal level, welfare laws at the state level in some states that said you cannot have a man in the house. I did a video, it's on my YouTube channel, where I take you through that U.S. Supreme Court case and break that down, because most people, when they say that, don't talk about that. One. Two, welfare was created not by Lyndon Baines Johnson. Welfare was created in 1935 under President Roosevelt, and that was created for white women. Okay, that was part of the Social Security Administration Act. So if you go back and look at that history, and then we see, yes, you start having the decline in marriage after about 1960. But what people leave out is June 17th, 1971, when a president named Richard Nixon declared his war on drugs. The war on drugs began with Richard Nixon in 1971, and we saw the U.S. prison population quadruple from 1970 to 1993. It went from about 300,000 to 1.3 million. If people go to the U.S. Bureau of Prison Statistics, I think it is, or Bureau of Prison Statistics.gov, you look at the U.S. prison populations from 1970 to 1993 and on. Okay, so you do see a decline in the marriage rate. All right, but there are a number of contributing factors to that. One of those contributing factors would be the law that came out of California about 1969 that made it much easier to get a divorce based upon irreconcilable differences. That law was signed into law by a governor named Ronald Reagan, who went on to become president. And then versions of that law went around the country to various states. So they're contributing factors that we see to that. But as I always talk about, the African-American family was attacked. The African-American family was attacked. The war on drugs, the deindustrialization of the inner city. If you read this book right here, so this book people started referencing when we had the fake takeover of city government here in the city of Detroit. Okay, back around 2010, I think it was or so. The Origins of the Urban Crisis, Race and Inequality in Post-War Detroit by Thomas J. Segru. So if you start researching the fake takeover of Detroit, Thomas Segru's name comes up because he's a history professor, and he broke down the history of going back decades in the city of Detroit and the deindustrialization, okay, the deindustrialization prior to white flight, prior to Coleman Alexander Young becoming mayor in 1974. There was white flight where you had corporations taking companies out of Detroit, taking companies out of downtown Detroit, moving them out to the suburbs. And that U.S. Interstate Highway Act of 1952-56 was all part of that. Okay, so we have to understand now all of what I just talked about deals with policy. All of that deals with law. So when we start understanding this history, and I say we have to understand history, economics, law, and politics, then we start seeing how all these things that are floating around in the atmosphere and we see headlines about in the news impact us at the ground level.
You know, it's interesting, too, when you talk about deindustrialization, the folks who have the money and run these companies have found ways to save money on labor. The industrialization of those cities was one of the contributors to the success of the Black community, because people could get good paying jobs. They could acquire real estate, which is really the cornerstone of living the American dream. And then all of a sudden they got this bright idea. If we hire people across the ocean to do the work, then we can pay them less and we can make more money. This is all tied into, you know, how corporations have got over at the expense of the American public.
Right. Well, so it's two things there. So you're talking about, sounds like globalization and exporting of jobs. So you have that, but also when you started having the deindustrialization of the inner cities across the country, especially Detroit, post World War II. World War II ends in 1945. When they're taking these corporations and these factories out of the inner cities and moving them out to the suburbs, they're putting them on what we'll call sprawling campuses. And in these factories, they have more automation in these factories, which eliminated a lot of the low entry level jobs that many of our grandfathers and great grandfathers got when they moved up here from Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee. Okay, so that's very important to understand. You have that, and then you have shipping jobs to Mexico, shipping jobs to Canada or overseas, things of this nature. Corporations are in business to make money. They ain't in business to help people. Okay, but you can make money and still have jobs locally, because if you cut too many jobs, people are not going to have enough money to buy your products, right? So, but the other part of globalization is also exporting goods so you can market globally as opposed to just in the US. Yeah. So when we go back and do that analysis, we're going to see that historically technology in many ways have eliminated jobs for African Americans. Now, sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad. But when we look at, for instance, the invention of the cotton gin about 1793 by Eli Whitney, what this did, this increased the need for enslaved labor. Okay. And it increased the need for enslaved African labor because it brought down the cost of the production of cotton. Because it was very hard to pick the seeds out of cotton. The cotton gin made that very easy. So, and then we look at the creation of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution actually goes back to the 1790s in the Manchester, England area. And the main crop of the Industrial Revolution at that time was cotton, largely produced by enslaved Africans. So when we connect, and so when I deal with the Labor Day history, right? You can't talk about Labor Day without talking about the labor movement. You can't talk about the labor movement without the creation of the Industrial Revolution, which was largely on the backs of enslaved African people. So you have to understand how all that history is connected.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
You know, before I bring you in, Brother Hamtoni, I just want to remind the listeners that you are listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Michael Imhotep. He is the founder of the African History Network. He's got some classes that we are going to let you know about before this hour ends. Yes. And we're going to bring you as much as we can within the time that we are together. And also, I just have to encourage folks to go to our YouTube channels, respectively. Like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out tremendously in our mission to bring this vital information to you.
Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 2 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles, and I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay, I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country. Been hosting the African History Network show 14 years. But we look at there's over 200 slides that I put together. 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at. The 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wapakamane, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class. Okay, so you can register for this. This content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, and we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN Show. So we have the information right here on our website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN Show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc. Upgrade equipment, take care of what needs to be done.
And just one thing I wanted to point out, I saw a video yesterday, I believe, either yesterday or the day before, but it was of a fast food restaurant where the person basically facilitating taking the order was in the Philippines. Yeah. And they were being paid 1/5 of what someone who would get that entry-level job here in America to do the same thing. It's really critical that we understand the impact that mechanization and AI and all these things are having on our labor market. And this is at a time when, as you point out, we have such a high employment rate. But again, those folks who move those jobs overseas are always thinking about ways that they can increase their profit line, and they're going to use technology in order to advance that. Brother Antonio?
Yeah, Brother Hotep, I appreciate the information that you dropped.
Thanks, brother.
It's so many things that I took a few notes that was coming in my head. I kind of want to backtrack just a little bit. I know
go ahead.
Talk about the industrialization and stuff like that, but because we are on the cusp of this election situation, and it may be due to media's whatever that they showing all these blacks supposedly defecting and talking about Trump, but you made a good point about us as far as knowing politics is concerned. I'm gonna state a few things, and you could pull which one you want to talk about. But I got to mention a few things. Okay. One is that we have to understand politics and how politics work. And a lot of times we put a lot of this on the president. You got to understand the president is not a dictator. You got to have,
At least this one isn't. At least this one isn't.
Right. Yeah, well, this one is.
He's not dictating anything, really.
Right. But but how the system is set up, that's supposed to be what make America so great, is with those other offshoot branches that help decide the situation. So some things you can't do, just like with Obama. When they took the Senate back, I believe it was, after his second year, everything
2014.
Yes, everything went downhill. He couldn't do a lot of the things. And a lot of the bills, my brother then was just talking about the other day, another bridge, they collapsed another bridge, hit, they've been talking about the infrastructure bills and things of that nature for a long time, trying to get those things passed, but they never have. But anyway, we need to know politics.
Well, Biden got it passed.
Yes.
The $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Go ahead.
And so you got to understand that the president is not a dictator, so we need to know how politics work. Now, a lot of black folks talking about, and this one you could comment on, that Trump, we like Trump because Trump helped the HBCUs. I read a little article on it. There was a couple things he do, but actually Congress passed this bipartisan legislation to help with the HBCUs. But that's the thing that they're hanging their hat on. Well, he helped the HBCUs. He helped the HBCUs again. So that's very important and critical, and I guess in moving that needle. Trump did so much for us and things of that nature. Because I agree with you. I think they're doing a poor job in putting out exactly the things that Biden did. All this is leading to the point of why it's important to vote. You elegantly stated why it is important to vote, because these margins, these small margins made a big difference on how we been governed here. Because if it wasn't that much important to vote, then why are we putting so much effort into stopping people from voting?
Absolutely.
If it wasn't important at all. And then lastly, regardless on who's president, that's why it's important for us to have a collective consciousness or some type of community. If you don't have an agenda with things that benefit you as a people and as a community, it don't make no difference on who's in power, because people will walk over you and you won't never get anything done. So if you don't have some type of community to where your politicians can listen to you to press your agenda and stand up collectively with your agenda, then nobody's not going to pay you in any condition, pay any attention at all, you know, because it always boils down to us. When Vince talked about white man's white ice is colder than ours, I think psychologically through images, it made us want to be accepted, because it always boils down to, at this stage in the game, most African Americans just want to be accepted by the system and by the man, you know. And lastly, my boy, he hit me the other day. He said he want to know what define this so-called black. What does it mean to be black? You know what I mean? What should we attributes or some of the things that really define us? Because like you say, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So what it is and what we need to be doing to call ourselves a community.
Okay. So
I know it's a lot there, my brother.
Yeah. Just very quickly, let me tackle this. So one, you talked about HBCUs and under the Trump administration. Okay, so that was Representative Alma Adams' bill that got passed by Congress that Trump signed into law, that Trump takes the whole credit for,
right?
The increasing the funding for HBCUs. Alma Adams is a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. Okay, now one thing that I do agree needs to happen is that members of the Congressional Black Caucus need to be more vocal about what they're doing and what they get accomplished. Also, people should visit the Congressional Black Caucus website as well. But Trump just takes credit for things that he didn't even do, or bills he just signed into law, and makes it seem like he just created the whole idea himself. Okay, he was trying to take credit for stuff that Obama did. Okay, so you have to be careful. This is one of the reasons why he told 30,000 lies and false or misleading statements, as documented by the Washington Post. Two, $5.8 billion allocated to HBCUs under the Biden-Harris administration in 2021. If we look at the document that came out, the fact sheet that came out from the Biden-Harris administration, May 16, 2024, Biden-Harris administration announces record over $16 billion with a B in support for historically Black colleges and universities. So I put this here in your chat, so maybe you could post that on your social media platforms, guys. Today, the Biden-Harris administration announced a new record in federal funding and investments in historically Black colleges and universities, totaling more than $16 billion for fiscal years 2021 through current available data for fiscal year 2024. This new reported total is up from the previously announced over $7 billion and captures significant additional action already undertaken. Okay, read the rest of this. They go through and explain all of it. But these are things that are already happening. They didn't just all of a sudden last night decide to allocate $16 billion. No, these are things that have been taking place since they got into office. I always take people back to January 20th, 2021. There were 10 executive orders that Biden signed his first day in office. Yeah. One of those was Executive Order 13985, which dealt with attacking discrimination when it came to federal, when it came to like 90 different federal agencies. Okay, so that's at whitehouse.gov as well. You can check that out. Also, now you talked about let me see. You talked about that, and you talked about HBCUs, and then it was I'm going to deal with what does it mean to be Black, but you talked about something else after HBCUs. Brother Antonio,
talk a little bit about the us knowing this political stuff and having a Black agenda.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. So very important. One, you have to understand history, economics, law, and politics to be able to put together any type of realistic, sensible, logical agenda. All right. And I've been involved in writing public policy for the city of Detroit. Okay. Previously. So you have to look at understand your history, how you got to where you are today. What were the laws and policies put in place that inflicted the harm, created the maldistribution of wealth, power, and resources, the structural inequities, and deal with realistic policies that can repair that damage. Okay, at the city, state, and local, federal level. Many states have laws that ban race-based policies, like the state of California is one of them. So the California Reparations Task Force, any type of reparations that are administered and passed by the state legislature, signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom, it has to be based upon lineage as opposed to race, because race-based policies are illegal in the state of California, meaning it's illegal to have policies for only one race of people. At the federal level, you have a similar law. It's Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs. I learned this being involved in writing public policy for the city of Detroit. And our corporate counsel told us that it's illegal to write policies that are only for African Americans. So we had to craft the legislation that was for Detroit-based residents. You had to live in Detroit. And at the time, Detroit was like 85% African American. Okay. So anybody that thinks that they're going to be able to get reparations only for African Americans, unless it's based upon lineage, they're lying to you, because they don't understand federal law. And you can, I tell everybody, go to archives.gov, which is the U.S. National Archives, read the 1964 Civil Rights Act, go to Section 601, Title VI, and you can read it for yourself. Or you can just Google, why are race-based policies illegal at the federal level? That's the first thing that's going to come up. So you have to be able to understand law to be able to craft policy, which will become law. Okay. 2, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican, but I sure as hell ain't stupid. I can see whose policies I can see who keeps voting against our own interests overwhelmingly. It doesn't mean I agree with everything Democrats do. Okay. Some should be voted out of office, but overwhelmingly I agree with their policies more than Republicans' policies. Okay. 2, read the U.S. Constitution, because if you don't understand the U.S. Constitution, you won't understand most of this, even at the local level, because the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives states rights. So rights that are not enumerated in the Constitution go to the state level, which is why when it comes to policing, states have more control over policing than the federal government does. Okay. A lot of people don't know this. They keep looking to the president for this bill, that bill. Yes, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would have been good, but you got more control over policing at your local level. And one of the things that needs to happen is there has to be a clarion call to African Americans to apply to police departments and get these jobs that are available and become the type of officers we keep saying we want to see. Yes. There's a nationwide shortage of police officers right now.
Perfect.
And most of these civil rights organizations, social justice organizations are not telling African Americans, look, if you want officers who will respect people's humanity, de-escalate situations, only use lethal force when it's absolutely necessary. If you want those type of officers, you can apply and get these jobs right now. But oftentimes we confuse activity with productivity. And we keep getting involved in marches and protests, but don't understand power acquisition. You can right now apply for these jobs and gain power in these police departments. Okay, so all this comes together. Now, to put together any type of Black agenda, and I tell people, when you deal with, if we go back to 2018, Florida, Andrew Gillum against Ron DeSantis, right? You had some quote unquote woke conscious African Americans who said they weren't going to vote for Andrew Gillum because they said he didn't have a Black agenda. I told them Ron DeSantis has a Black agenda. He has an anti-Black agenda. And an anti-Black agenda is even worse than not having a Black agenda. And if you look at what Ron DeSantis has been doing in Florida, the attack on African American studies, you look at the Gestapo-like voter group he put together of law enforcement to go after people who they said voted illegally. And then most of those cases are thrown out. And that was designed to intimidate African Americans and keep us from voting. If you look at what Ron DeSantis has been doing, you'll see he has an anti-Black agenda. So one, Black agenda is what we put together and present to politicians. 2, a politician does not have to call it a Black agenda. If you, especially if it's a state or federal office, I really don't want them to have on their website Black agenda, because that's going to be attacked more than anything else. You can have the same policies, just take the term Black agenda off of it. The blacker something appears, the more it's going to be attacked and the more it's going to be stopped. You mentioned the Democrats losing control of the Senate. That was 2014. But they lost control of the House in 2010 with the rise of the Tea Party, which was really in opposition to President Barack Obama. And it was really, when you study the policies of the Tea Party, and one of the financial backers of the Tea Party was Jenny Thomas, who's Clarence Thomas' white wife. Okay. So that was really an anti-black movement, the Tea Party. And then we could see that continue into 2014. And when they lost control of the House, that basically reduced their ability to get any bills passed through the legislative branch of government, so President Obama could sign them in. Then Mitch McConnell became Senate Majority Leader when Republicans took back control of the Senate in 2014. They blocked 103 federal judge nominations that President Barack Obama made, and they blocked his nomination to the Supreme Court, Merrick Garland, which left that huge vacancy when Trump became president through the Electoral College. So people should go to archives.gov, which is U.S. National Archives, as well as loc.gov, Library of Congress website, and read the U.S. Constitution. Because if you understand the U.S. Constitution, you understand how the Electoral College worked, and the U.S. Constitution created the Electoral College in 1787. If you understand how all that works, then you realize, oh, that's why they're trying to suppress our votes. Oh, you mean the census is connected to how many electoral college votes a state has? And you take the number of seats a state has in the House of Representatives, which is based upon population. You add to that the number of U.S. senators that a state has, which is 2 based upon the Constitution. That tells you how many electoral college votes a state has. And you win electoral college votes associated with a state by winning the popular vote in the state. Oh, so you mean that's why Republicans engage in voter suppression? So when you start understanding how all this is connected, then you'll see right now it corrects wrong behavior.
We have just a few moments before we migrate over to our online presence on YouTube and Facebook, but I just wanted to make sure that the viewing audience and the listening audience gets the benefit of awareness of the history class who are teaching. So
yes,
you want to bring us up to date on how they can take advantage of the class.
Absolutely. Go to my website, africanhistorynetwork.com, africanhistorynetwork.com, or theafricanhistorynetwork.com, either one. I teach classes Saturdays, usually 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The class I'm teaching today, Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We deal with thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime, even after the course is over with. The content is PG-13. You can use it with your children. There's 80 to 100 articles that I reference. It's a very visual class. There's 200 slides that I show you that I put together. I've been teaching this class since 2007, on and off. And then I have a second class that's going to start, and you'll be able to register for our bundle pack of courses also. We'll talk about that in class today at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The second class that I teach is called Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay. So visit our website, africanhistorynetwork.com. You can email me any of your questions through the website. Also, if you want me to speak at your next event, your Juneteenth event, anything like that, contact me. And Black, the popularization of the term Black really came out of the Black Power movement in the mid 1960s, which dealt with a consciousness. It wasn't just skin color. It dealt with a consciousness of Black empowerment and being proud to be Black, being proud to be of African descent. And you are correct. All skin folk are not kinfolk.
All right. Well, I have a vivid recollection of James Brown. Say it loud. Yes. I'm Black and I'm proud.
I'm proud. Yes.
We took over the lunchroom one day. We put the record on and we marched around.
Remind me to say something about that too when we go on the other side. About when that song came out, how I was feeling.
All right. We'll do that when we come back. I want to shout out to all the folks who are viewing us online. We've got folks on YouTube. We got folks on Facebook. They're taking advantage of the information that is coming our way, and we sincerely appreciate your presence with us on this platform. Always, if you're on, like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already done that. Shout outs to everyone who has placed comments in the chat. I do the best I can to amplify your comment. Brother Antonio, any announcement you want to make before we migrate over to our online platform?
Yes, and for our Cleveland residents, I believe the African History Museum is doing a piece on Malcolm X tomorrow. check with the museum and see exactly what time is that I can. I don't know if you know the time of that, Vince. If you got that flyer,
I don't have it.
And again, we will remind you about the ball on the 23rd and also the parade and festival, 216-323-6155.
All right. We just want to take this time to thank our engineer. You know, the radio station is going through some changes. They've been actually relocated from their spot over there on Carnegie, and they're now in Independence. So they didn't have phone lines for the past few days, but we were able to facilitate the broadcast. And we sincerely appreciate what he was able to do in order to make sure that we are on the air again. So Tone Harley, big ups, bro. We really, really appreciate you. And we appreciate those of you who are tuned in. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace, y'all.
Peace, peace.
Peace.
Okay, we've got about 10 seconds before we make the official migration. Brother Imhotep, again, I commend you for your knowledge. You know, I don't think it's a small thing that you can remember the names of those books. You can remember the dates. You can remember the people. You know, I could venture to say that probably 90% or fewer of us have ever read the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence of all any of those documents, but somehow you're able to read them and make sense of them. And yes. I do know that there's conversation about the fact that, you know, we're not really fully living up to the tenets of the Constitution. You know, we've got this whole thing about states' rights, and, you know, sometimes the states' rights overrule what the federal government does. It's kind of the checks and balances system that we have in place, and it's really necessary. But if we had more involvement, we would have more leverage in outcomes, but we don't participate in the process. Here in Ohio, in the past year, there was an effort for the Republicans to gain more control by requiring more of a majority or something. There were just things that they wanted to do to alter the political process and basically take away the small rights that we have. You know, here in Ohio, we have the right to petition. You know, you can overturn laws if you take the right approach. But if you disengage people from the process, then you take away their power. And that's what they are really intentional about doing. The governor of Ohio essentially has taken over the Department of Education in such a way that it neutralizes the ability for the members of the Board of Education, the State Board of Education, who are elected to office, to advocate for students. And what happens in the process is that governor hooks up his boys who have an interest in profit through the education process, and then they get their way. And in the meantime, you know, you got universities being threatened with defunding if they have any kind of DEI protocols that are required for their employees. Just all kinds of things. They are working feverishly, and I'm speaking of the Republicans. They're working feverishly to take away our livelihood.
Absolutely.
You know what, just one thing. I think that was, Vince, in Ohio. I think they was shooting for a single majority rule versus on some of those things you got to have, like in the Senate, so many votes in order for it to pass. And so, but I think they were looking for a single majority. So since they had it was more Republicans in power in the state, so they could just win by one vote and get all their whole agenda.
So all this deals with law and policy, okay? And everything they do to us, they use the law to do it. And when they get caught breaking the law, they go hire an attorney at law to defend them in the court of law. So the common denominator is law, okay? So we need to understand the law better than they understand the law, so we can navigate throughout the system, not get caught up in these booby traps and pitfalls, and understand how to use all of this to our advantage and protect ourselves from these attacks. So when you mentioned taking over education, and one of the things that Republicans want to do is to attack public education, attack public schools, diminish the number of public schools, diminish the number of students that are in public schools. And that has two main reasons. One of them is because public education, because most African American students generally are going to be in public schools. And two, when you look at the creation of public education, state funded public education, it was largely you're going to let me put it like this. If you go back to the 1867 Alabama state constitution, okay, during Reconstruction, Alabama creates the first state funded public school system in the South. And it was an integrated school system. It was for African American children and white children. Okay. When you look at the yesterday was the 70th anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education, 1954 U.S. Supreme Court case, right? When you look at what happened after that Supreme Court case took place, you had some states that shut down public schools in the state. Okay, after that, because they did not want to desegregate the schools. You're going to have an increase in the use of vouchers for poor white children so that they can go to various schools. And they were using the voucher system as a way to resegregate the schools and lock African Americans out. The real fight for Brown versus Board of Education was not so we could sit next to white children. The real fight was we wanted equal funding for our schools and our communities. That's what the real fight was over, because we were not having the same amount of funding for in our communities. And we had African American teachers, principals, things of this nature. And what was given to us was busing. What was given to us was integrating the schools and busing African American children from inner city schools to suburban schools, where they dealt with a lot of teachers in many cases who didn't want them there, students who didn't want them there. But that's not what we really wanted. We wanted equal funding for our schools because we wanted to keep our teachers, keep our principals. They were part of our communities. Our parents knew them. They went to church with us, things of this nature, right? But one of the reasons why we continue to see this attack on public education is because the teachers unions across the country are some of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party. So if you understand how all this is connected, you have Republicans who are attacking public education to diminish the number of students in public education, to reduce the number of teachers that are in these schools, part of the teachers unions, which will also reduce the amount of money that these teachers unions can donate to Democratic candidates. So when you start seeing how all this is connected, then you start really understanding this agenda behind it. The other thing is you talked about DEI, the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. Now, let me say this. That doesn't mean that all public schools are good. There needs to be an overhaul of public schools and what's taught and how things are taught. And some schools need to shut down just like some charter schools need to shut down. Okay. But there's something much deeper behind all this, and Republicans really want to take over control of education. But when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion is connected to the attack on critical race theory. And Republicans and white conservatives, etc., they are focused on trying to wipe out any progress that African Americans have made over the last 30, 40 years. Okay. They have attacked affirmative action when it comes to college admissions. They want to get rid of affirmative action altogether when it comes to corporations. And the main thing that they want to attack when it comes to DEI is corporations partnering with groups like the Fearless Fund. Okay, those African American women who created a fund to help finance not just Black women-owned businesses, but businesses owned by women of color. Because I've talked to those sisters. We had them on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and they were saying no, their funding is not exclusively for Black women. Okay, it's for women of color, because once again, they already know race-based policies are illegal. Okay, so when Ed Blum sued them, when you read what Ed Blum, white conservative activist Ed Blum, who is the same one who filed a lawsuit dealing with affirmative action and college admissions, Ed Blum is saying that these grants are for Black women-owned businesses. That's not true. It's for women of color owned businesses. So he's even misstating what the loans and grants are for. Okay, but that's strategic. And you have all these people, all these Republicans, whether it's Ron DeSantis, whether it's Matt Gaetz, they always want to quote Dr. King. And they want to quote Dr. King from the speech that was renamed I Have a Dream, talking about the content of people's character as opposed to the color of their skin. But in that speech, Dr. King is talking about dismantling white supremacy and racism in this country. The speech was about holding America accountable for a promissory note we were given 100 years prior in 1863. He's talking about the Emancipation Proclamation. And he said when we went to cash that check at the bank, it was marked insufficient funds. Okay. He's talking about dismantling white supremacy. He talked about the attack on voting rights. He talked about police brutality. He talked about the Negro moving from a smaller ghetto to a larger ghetto. He talks about all that in the speech. So what you see Republicans doing is trying to conserve, trying to maintain all levels of white supremacy and reverse any progress that African Americans have made in the last 30, 40 years.
I'm curious, Brother Michael, within the past few years, we've seen a pushback on certain memorials or monuments that have been made to folks in the Confederacy and so forth and so on. There's a desire on the part of some to erase that blemish on our history. What are your thoughts about doing away with some of those ways that some of our anti-heroes have been honored in our country?
Well, first of all, usually nations don't have monuments honoring traitors to the nation. Those that participated in the Confederacy committed treason based upon Article 3, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution. They took up arms against the Union. They separated from the Union, created the Confederacy in March or February of 1861. And they fought to maintain slavery. They fought to maintain slavery. When you read their statements of secession, okay, in their statements of secession, whether it's Texas, whether it's Mississippi, whether it's Alabama, they talk about how central to their way of life slavery was. They talked about the wealth that was created from slavery. So recently you had, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I just posted the video on my social media platforms. There was in Virginia, a school board in Virginia voted to rename 2 schools after 2 Confederate, what they call Confederate heroes. Okay. And Thomas Stonewall Jackson and General Robert E. Lewis. Okay. Now they changed the names of those schools in 2020 after George Floyd was killed. Okay. So after George Floyd was killed, May 25th, 2020, there was this whole reckoning on race that took place in various ways across the country. And you started having these schools renaming, these schools named after Confederate traitors being renamed. So now the people, a lot of the people who were renaming the schools, they felt forced to do it. They really didn't want to do it in the first place. But now that they see an opportunity, well, okay, we can change it back because we never wanted to change it in the first place. Now they're starting to do this. So nations don't have, like in Germany, they don't have like buildings and schools named after Adolf Hitler. Okay. Nations don't name buildings, schools, things like this after traitors. Okay. 2, all the Confederate monuments need to come down. All the Confederate monuments need to come down. In their place should be a historical marker talking about what was there and why it was there, because that history still needs to be taught. That history of what happened, the history of why the Confederacy seceded from the Union, because they thought Lincoln was going to free the slaves. South Carolina was the first state to secede the Union from the Union, December 20th, 1860, about 6 weeks after Abraham Lincoln became president-elect in that November 1860 presidential election. So you have to deal with that history, because most Americans really don't understand the history of the Civil War, don't understand the history of Reconstruction, which is 1865 to 1877. And those 2 periods of time put us on a trajectory to where we are today. So the reason why those Confederate monuments were erected, most of those monuments were not erected during the Civil War or right after the Civil War ended. Most of them were erected between the periods of about right around 1890 to about 1920 or so, that period of time. And then during the Civil Rights Movement from about 1955 to about 1970. And the reason why they were erected is largely to keep African Americans, to intimidate and terrorize African Americans and keep us in a subservient position. That's why they were erected in the first place. There was a piece from motherjones.com that talked about, and I'm trying to pull this up now. Yeah, the real story behind all those, the real story behind all those Confederate statues. That's the name of it. August 15, 2017 by Kevin Drum. Everybody read this. The real story behind all those Confederate statues. And it shows you a timeline of the true periods of time when most of those statues were erected. Okay. And we know 1890, that's right before Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896 U.S. Supreme Court case, which solidifies separate but equal. Okay, so you're dealing with that period of time. You're dealing with 1890. You're dealing with the Mississippi State Constitution of 1890 that where the white supremacists rewrite the state constitution of Mississippi, impose poll taxes and literacy tests. And then also what you're going to see is you're going to see other former Confederate states rewrite their state constitutions because African Americans were voting in high numbers in the South. Most of us were still in the South at that time. The Great Migration doesn't happen till about 1915. And we know the 15th Amendment of 1870, February 3rd, 1870, guaranteed the right to vote for African-American men. So it's about 2,000 African-American men who get elected into political office in Southern states. So the South Carolina state legislature was predominantly African-American men. All right. So we're going to see Mississippi 1890. We see Louisiana 1898, South Carolina 1895, Georgia around 1910. We see Oklahoma. We're going to see them all go through systematically, rewrite their state constitutions, impose poll taxes, literacy tests, in some cases, property ownership requirements, saying that you have to own property to be able to vote. And then what Louisiana does, so that they don't hurt too many poor white people who don't own property or can't pass a literacy test, they create a grandfather clause, which states that if your grandfather could not vote prior to 1867 because he was a slave, then that means you can't vote. So after the 15th Amendment of 1870 gets adopted, they come up with all these ways to try to get around the 15th Amendment to suppress the African-American vote because they always feared us having political power and utilizing the political power. Okay. So when you start understanding this history, especially in these former Confederate states, you can draw a direct line. We talked about Florida when, a few minutes ago. I mentioned Florida when we're live on the radio. 2018, when you had Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis running, right? And there was an amendment on the ballot to restore voting rights to former felons, okay, in right. Florida. In Florida, prior to 2018, prior to that ballot measure passing by about 66% of the vote, okay, it passed overwhelmingly. You lost your right to vote for life in Florida. Florida was one of 4 states that still existed where you lost your right to vote for life if you had a felony conviction. Why did Florida have a felony disenfranchisement law where you lost your vote to right for life? It goes back to the Florida State Constitution of 1868, 3 years after slavery ends. Why did they put that in place? Because African Americans were 48% of the state population in Florida in 1868 as a result of slavery. Okay. And they were trying to suppress the African American vote. So, and not only did they put the felony disenfranchisement into law, but they also expanded the number of crimes that qualified as felonies. And they were largely implemented. They largely expanded that the crimes that they associated with African Americans. And they said they did this to prevent a Negro legislature. So when you go back and look during the period of time of Reconstruction, you look at African Americans and also white Republicans who were attacked by white supremacists, attacked by the Ku Klux Klan, in some cases killed, trying to suppress the vote. Then you start seeing, I can make a direct connection from the Reconstruction era and the political violence that brought an end to Reconstruction, I can make a direct connection between that and the January 6, 2021 insurrection, okay, and that political violence. And that happened the day after Senator Raphael Warnock, the black man in Georgia, and John Ossoff won their Senate seats. And this gave Democrats a 50-50 slim majority in the Senate. Okay. And this was after Biden and Harris won in Georgia, which was largely a red state, former Confederate state. I can make a direct connection between the political violence during the Reconstruction era and the political violence we saw January 6, 2021. And one of the main themes of that political violence, January 6, 2021, was African Americans were cheating. They were cheating in Detroit. They were cheating in Atlanta. They were cheating in Milwaukee, and they were cheating in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was, and a lot of that was a whole backlash to us voting and voting for Biden Harris. Okay. And then voting for Raphael Warnock in Georgia. And if you understand the history of Georgia, about 1963, you had a white segregationist member of the state legislature in Georgia named Denmark Groover. Okay, Denmark Groover was a Democrat segregationist, and he's the one who pushed the statewide election law. Okay, designed to lock African Americans out of statewide political power, and this was the statewide runoff election law. Okay, so what that meant was, in the primary, if no candidate got either 50% or 51% of the vote, a majority, and nobody got 51% of the vote, you had to have a runoff election by the two top vote getters, right? Even if the top vote getter gets 50% and nobody else gets anywhere near him, you still have to have a runoff between the top two. Why did they create that? They created that because if in the primary, if all African Americans put their votes behind one African American candidate and that person wins and white people split their vote, this was designed to give white people a do-over. So in the general election, they could all coalesce around that one white candidate, regardless of political affiliation, to lock African Americans out of statewide political power. That's why that law exists right now in Georgia. Well, Senator Raphael Warnock defeated that twice because he won to continue the previous senator's term, and then he won a full term January 5th, 2021. That was not supposed to happen. Okay, so then the next day, even though Trump had been messaging about it for 2 months, the big steal, raised $250 million from losers and suckers, saying the election was stolen. He raised $250 million in 2 months, saying the election was stolen, and we're going to file all these lawsuits and all this stuff. There was 62 lawsuits filed. They lost 61 of them. The one that they won was in Philadelphia, and all that dealt with how close poll watchers could be to people actually counting the vote. They didn't have any evidence of widespread voter fraud, stolen election, none of that stuff. They lied. And they raised $250 million in 2 months to file these lawsuits. This is the type of nonsense you're dealing with. Now, you want fools like that running the government? I don't think so.
I'm just remembering that Warnock was running against Herschel Walker, of all people, who didn't appear to have any kind of sense. I mean,
yeah,
it just boggled my mind how he could even seriously be considered candidate for the U.S. Senate.
Well, they went to the Rolodex. They went to the Rolodex.
No, Donald Trump chose Herschel Walker. Because see, remember Herschel Walker, he used to play for, I think it was the Washington or the New Jersey Generals. He used to play in the USFL for the team that Donald Trump owned. Remember that? Oh. He used to play in the USFL for the team that Donald Trump owned. So Trump picked Herschel Walker because they said this black guy could beat that black guy. And they knew Herschel Walker was going to vote however they told him to vote. Okay. But it blew up in their face. All right. And Raphael Warnock, I mean, this is a brilliant brother. And we have to understand there are only 100 U.S. senators. Okay. You need 60 votes in the Senate to get any bill passed unless it deals with judges. When it comes to judges, federal judges, U.S. Supreme Court, you only need 51 votes. Every vote in the U.S. Senate is crucial. And if Democrats lose control of the Senate, they can't get any more federal judges confirmed unless Republicans vote along with it. Now, you need to get to at least probably 55 U.S. senators, because if you get to 55 Democratic U.S. senators, then you can do a carve out to the filibuster or get rid of the filibuster altogether. OK, because as it stands now in the Senate, unless it deals with a vote that deals with judges, or unless it passes the budget reconciliation process, you need 60 votes in the Senate as opposed to a simple majority of 51. The Senate operates differently than the House of Representatives. In the House, you just need a simple majority. OK, so you need generally 218 votes to get any bill passed in the House out of 435 members. The Senate doesn't work like that. So one of the reasons why we have to have political education, and this is one of the things that the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense had. They had a 6-week political education class that you had to go through when you became a member. It wasn't just about wearing black leather jackets and berets and having a shotgun or carrying a gun or saying black power, things like this. There was real political education because they were a political party also. OK, so this is the type of information that we have to understand, connecting laws and policies and political positions, connecting all that to conditions on the ground and how to change that, bring into existence what it is we say we want, and also protect the gains that we have made at the same time.
Good point. Good point. Absolutely, because we definitely got misinformation about old Black Panther and what they was about and what they did, and again, just like everything else, the dismantling of everything. I was reading some material, going back to where you talked about coming out of emancipation, how many black cities that cropped up around the country shortly after the freeing of slaves is just astounding and amazing. But they worked their hand and did the best they can to dismantle every one of those particular progressive cities. Now, a question: would you tie something me and my brother talk about? Would you tie because of that? You talked about the population of the slaves in Florida and the population of slaves.
Free African Americans. Yeah, but 1868. So that's after slavery ends. We were 48% of the population.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So would you say? Would you connect that to the opening of the doors of immigration into this country, connecting, why they, all these old latecomers coming in at this particular point after slavery, you think they, is a connection between the immigration, all the Poles and everybody else coming in at that point?
Well, you have, America has always been about exploitation of somebody, including white people. When you go back and you look at last week, we talked about Bacon's Rebellion, 1675, 1676 in the county of Virginia. The wealthy English tobacco plantation owners in the Virginia colony were also exploiting other people that we classify as white, whether they were English, whether they were Irish or what have you. So if you go back and study the formations of these various European countries, they started out as what were called groups of barbarians or collectively Germanic people. The Anglos, the Saxons, the Jutes, the Franks, the Alans, the Picts, things like this. These people have been fighting and killing each other for hundreds of years. Okay. In some cases over 1,000 years. So then the barbarians form kingdoms. The kingdoms become nation states, and those nation states continue to fight in wars called World War I and World War II. So they've been fighting and killing each other for hundreds of years and exploiting one another. So when we look at after slavery ends, we go back about 1866. This is when you're going to see national labor unions pop up. OK, like the National Labor Union, 1866. The labor unions were largely created to lock African Americans out of jobs that we were doing for free during slavery. There were at least 262 skills, trades and crafts that we had in this country from 1619 to 1865. OK, The book, I talk about this in my classes, the book by James Newton and Ronald Lewis called The Other Slaves, deals with this. They go through and document this. We were the shipbuilders. We were the engineers. We were the hemp baggers. We were the agriculturalists. We picked cotton. We cooked the food. We had skills. We dominated the skilled trades. It's going to be after slavery ends. And then you have the Civil Rights Act of 1866 passed by the Radical Republicans. The Civil Rights Act of 1866 gave African Americans the right to enter into legal contracts and also negotiate labor wages. Now you have these labor unions popping up, and they're designed to protect jobs for white men, including white immigrants coming to this country, and lock us out of the jobs we have been doing for free. So when we look at the whole immigration issue, we're looking at the 1% or 5% or 10%. We're looking at them trying to find other people to exploit, because when you look at those immigrants, those white immigrants largely who were coming into the country during that period of time, the 1890s, early 1900s, when they go work into the factories, they're going into factories that have poor ventilation. They're going into factories where they don't have a lot of labor rights. They're going into factories where they don't have laws that ban children working in them. So you have exploitation of these people coming into the country in the factories to benefit the same 1% as well. It's going to be with the modern labor union, the modern labor movement, that gets rights for laborers, that is going to change that. And then once African Americans are able to get into these labor unions, they have to deal with racism. They have to deal with lower pay, things like this. Once we go into the 50s and 60s, things of this nature, the labor unions are able to benefit African Americans. So, for instance, here in Detroit and Metro Detroit had the largest, that was the population where you had the largest number of African American homeowners here in Detroit and the Metro Detroit area, because of the auto industry and the labor movement. It wasn't just the auto industry, it was also the labor movement. Once we're able to get in, deal with the racism, rise up in rank some, get better paid, things of this nature. But originally, when we look at immigration, it was designed to one, benefit the 1%, top 5%, however, so they can exploit another group of people. Mm-hmm. Two, when we go back to last week, we talked about Herbert Hoover, 1928, and the Lily White movement. Well, we didn't talk about the Lily White movement in 1928. We actually talked about during the Great Depression, how 1.6 million Mexicans were deported back to Mexico, and about 60% of them were born here legally. Okay. Herbert Hoover initiated that. And he was saying these people were taking jobs away from white Americans. Okay. When actually they were contributing to the GDP. But because of, you have this tension, and you have a fear of the browning of America, and we can even talk about it going back to even at that time. White people have always looked, well, some white people have always looked at other non-white people as taking something away from them. Absolutely. And these people didn't earn it. These people want a handout, things like this, right? Those Mexicans were contributing to the growth of the economy, and actually the vegetation that they pick and the money that they spend at grocery stores, things of this nature, actually created demand for jobs. But they were targeted, and Herbert Hoover and other white people were saying, oh, no, they're taking jobs away from white people, so we're going to deport them. All right. And you see things like this take place today. All right. Now, like I said last week, yeah, you need new immigration laws. OK, you need to reduce the amount of time that people can stay here waiting for claiming political asylum. OK, because they can stay here 6-7 years. And then probably about 90% of people claiming political asylum end up getting deported anyway, because they don't qualify for it. But it takes so long for that to be determined that they can be here 6-7 years or so. OK, and the other thing that gets left out of this conversation is that even when it comes to undocumented immigrants. All right. About 40% of people who get classified as undocumented came here legally but overstayed visas. So there's like two main classifications of quote unquote undocumented. One is people who came here legally and overstayed their visas, and they need to go through and get their visas renewed if they can be renewed. The other are people who came here and were never legal. Okay, so it's like, give you an example. So if your birthday comes and your driver's license expires, but you continue to drive, you're driving illegally. But it's not like you never had a license. You need to go get it renewed. Okay, as long as you don't have any tickets or suspended license, things like this, right? But if you're driving and never had a license, that's something entirely different. All right. So, like we talked about last week, yeah, you need new immigration laws. And Donald Trump was the one that blocked the strongest immigration law that was going to be put in place in 30 years. And President Joe Biden said he would sign it into law, even though a lot of progressive Democrats didn't want him to sign it. He said, look, I'll sign this bill into law. He agreed with it. Not everything in it, but he agreed with it. Donald Trump killed it because Trump wants to run on immigration, and you're letting murderers and killers coming through the borders and fentanyl come through the borders. Really? So why did you tell Republicans in the House not to vote for the bill?
Yeah, I see. It's a lot of double talking. I don't know. It's suggestions and solutions. I remember back, what was it? Ice Cube was talking about putting an agenda together, and coming up with some things that we can present to anybody that's in, the political arena. What's your feelings on that? Because it just seems like we on this hamster wheel, just keep, going around and around in circle, getting misused, abused. You got a lot of people like Vince talked about earlier, conscious folks say, why vote? It's so much misinformation, and I'm thinking we can tie it all to just not having leaders doing what they're supposed to do and leading and educating us on what we need to do as a folks. Because personally, I'm tired of all this, I think people are subject to, and I guess that's history. Most people are subject to most things because they're ignorant to everything, and people take advantage of that. Right. What I mean? So what can we do? I don't know, until we change the consciousness of the individual, I don't know if we're going to ever get off this hamster wheel, because, and people not looking, to advance their cause or their agenda personally, that's why I push the old African tradition agenda, that talks about and understands, and bringing back some foundational cultural principles and practices that we can collectively agree on. Because right now, we all over the place. We Aboriginals. We doing this. We doing that. We not. You got this young group of folks coming up with all this, and it's just, And I was listening to the side of the TV. We still debating about even what to call ourselves. And here it is, 2024. So,
well, I know a lot of people in the quote unquote conscious community, and unfortunately, a lot of them don't understand politics. Don't understand law. They'll have varying understandings of history, but you really have to understand history in the last 224 years that leads us to where we are today, and really understand law, especially after slavery ends, going into the Reconstruction era, and after Reconstruction, the white supremacist Democrats taking back control of the state legislatures. And this is prior to the Lily White movement in 1928, which is the effort by Republicans to push African Americans out of the Republican Party, which is when we started slowly going over to the Democratic Party. People think that we became Democrats because of President Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1964, or when John F. Kennedy runs against Richard Nixon in 1960. By 1960, 2/3 of African Americans had already switched over to the Democratic Party because we saw we were getting more from the Democratic Party, and we were being pushed out of the Republican Party, and our issues and concerns were being ignored. So, and then what happened was a lot of the Republicans, a lot of the Democrats, a lot of the Southern segregationist Democrats, because you had Northern moderate Democrats, and then you have the Southern segregationist Democrats that people would ostensibly call Dixiecrats. What happened was a lot of those Southern segregationist Democrats went over to the Republican Party, where they stayed until they died, like Strom Thurmond. Okay. And Strom Thurmond in 1948, he ran for president as a Dixiecrat because in 1948, the Democratic Party had a more pro-civil rights agenda. Harry Truman was running for president. They had a more pro-civil rights agenda. So this is after World War II. This is after President Roosevelt dies in 1945. And Strom Thurmond runs as a Dixiecrat, which was the Southern segregationist party, as a counter to the Democratic Party and their pro-civil rights agenda. Is at the same time that those Dixiecrats are really going to bring back out that Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia, which people think is the Confederate flag, but never flew over the Confederacy. There were 3 flags that flew over the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. That flag that's on top of the General Lee car on the TV show The Dukes of Hazzard, and incidentally, that car is named after General Robert E. Lee, a white supremacist slave owner who committed treason. That's why it's called the General Lee. It's named after General Robert E. Lee, a slave owner. Mm-hmm. The flag that's on top of the car is the Confederate battle flag of Northern Virginia under General Robert E. Lee's army. All right. So that flag became a symbol of opposition to the civil rights movement. OK, so we have to understand, one, politics and law, how all this is connected. OK, you can start studying history because laws and policies shape history. 2, understand politics on a local level. Read your local newspapers, watch local news. You can listen to local radio, local talk radio, especially African-American talk radio. Then you start getting a better understanding of things taking place locally. Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered. Definitely. That's one of the best daily shows targeting African Americans. The Griot just canceled their 2 daily shows, Dr. Mark Lamont Hill's show, as well as Ebony. I forgot Ebony. I didn't even watch her show anyway, but read that, watch Roland Martin Unfiltered, watch the African History Network show. Definitely watch your show. Thegriot.com. Read the Griot, especially articles by April Ryan, White House correspondent April Ryan, who is a journalist. She's not a blogger. She's a journalist. OK, she has credentials. News1.com, but NBC News, ABC, CBS, CBS News, read their websites, the news they have there. Wall Street Journal, New York Times. I monitor about 35 news sources on a daily basis. OK. I've been doing this 14 years, been in media 14 years, hosting the African History Network show for 14 years. So I have to do extensive research to be able to talk about the topics that I talk about on my show, even before I got on Roland Martin Unfiltered, October 2020. We talked about Ice Cube's agenda for Black Americans. Ice Cube had good intentions. He was in way over his head. Okay. The first thing Ice Cube didn't know is that race-based policies are illegal at the federal level based upon Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Section 601, non-discrimination of federally assisted programs. He meant well, okay? He was way over his head, didn't have a clear understanding of politics and really how to bring all this into fruition. And you have to really understand history and the laws and policies put in place to understand what needs to be reversed, okay? You're going to have a combination. It's not going to be just one agenda. It's not going to. What I mean by that is you're going to have different groups, different organizations, different coalitions pushing numerous agendas to a presidential candidate. The presidential candidate takes all of that, including policies pushed to them by the Congressional Black Caucus, and puts together and crafts their policies based upon a combination of all those agendas. I know people, and Dr. Claude Anderson is one of my teachers. I've known Dr. Claude Anderson for years, interviewed him a number of times on the African History Network show. When he and I talk, we argue like an old married couple. And at the end of the conversation, usually he's forced to agree with me because I present facts and evidence. So a lot of people say, well, we need one agenda for Black people. There's never been a time in the history of this country with all the leaders we've had that African Americans agreed on one agenda. Okay, that's not going to happen. White people don't even agree on one agenda. That's not going to happen. What you can do is you can have different agendas, and people work in their different organizations on the city, county, state, and federal level. You can also have input into overall agendas that a presidential candidate has or what have you. But the fight really, the election is the end of one process and the beginning of another process. Okay, and somebody just posted Ice Cube met with Dr. Claude Anderson. I know, because I talked to Dr. Claude Anderson about it. I had back channel conversation. I know. I already know that. Yeah. And Ice Cube was still over his head. He meant well. Okay. I think there is a place for some entertainers who are knowledgeable of history, economics, law, and politics to play when it comes to politics. Craft and policy is not it, unless you have experience in craft and policy. Craft and policy is not it. Okay. Policy needs to be crafted by people who have an understanding of federal law, federal policy, what's in existence, things like this, what can actually be passed. You need that. You need historians. You need political scientists. You need legal experts, etc. Okay. And you're going to need grassroots people. I would think you need some grassroots people also that have a track record in actually getting things implemented and actually being on the ground also, because you're going to need that grassroots to be able to get this information out to people. But people just looking for just one agenda or something like that, it's not going to be just one agenda, because African Americans are not a monolith. Now, if we had a better understanding of history, we would have more commonality. But because we don't understand history, we're fragmented. But Ice Cube did mean well, and there were a lot of policies that Biden-Harris already had versions of, or what have you, or things that were already in place that he was advocating for also. But I think he did mean well, and he got a lot of attacks. And some of the attacks I think were uncalled for. But when you are trying to be in a position to help your people and get legislation passed, a lot of times it's a thankless job. When Dr. King was assassinated, when they did the autopsy, they said his heart was in the condition of a man in his 60s. He was 39 years old. Okay. Malcolm X was assassinated 39 years old. Medgar Evers was in his 30s. Okay. So we have fond memories of a lot of these heroes after they're dead, decades after they were dead. When Dr. King was assassinated, he was the most hated man in America because he came out in opposition publicly to the Vietnam War, April 4th, 1967. He was assassinated exactly 1 year to the day after that, April 4th, 1968. Okay. And Dr. King was calling for a radical redistribution of wealth in this country. He was against the military industrial complex. He was fighting against poverty, and he was initiating the Poor People's Campaign. And it wasn't just for Black Americans, because he understood that you had to have a war on poverty, period. Not just for Black people, but for white people as well. The other thing he understood was, if it's only a Black movement fighting against poverty, it's definitely not going to work. That's definitely not going to work. It's going to have to be multiracial. Right, and right. There was an interview he did with NBC News. It's about 27 minutes. It was in 1968. 1967. It was 11 months before he was assassinated. So it was like May, I think, of 1967. And it was talking about the next step of the civil rights movement. But in that interview, he talked about how, because of the Vietnam War, okay, it made it much harder for the civil rights movement to get any media coverage, for them to get their issues dealt with and things like this because of the Vietnam War and the attention that the media was shifting to focus on that war. But if people, it's on YouTube, on NBC News's YouTube channel. And if you go to NBCnews.com and just search for Dr. King interview 1967, it will blow your mind what he was talking about. And this is, Dr. King has been a revolutionary. He was a revolutionary even during the Montgomery bus boycott. People think, oh, he just became revolutionary in 68. No, he didn't. You haven't been. He wrote 5 books. You haven't been paying attention to him. He was a revolutionary even during the Montgomery bus boycott. Okay. And this dovetails to Malcolm and Dr. King. Their ideologies were converging toward the end of both their lives. Okay. Even more so converging. Malcolm, July 31st, 1963, the month before the March on Washington, Malcolm sends a letter to the leading civil rights leaders, including Dr. King, requesting a meeting with them and inviting them to come to Harlem, New York, for a meeting. And I think it was going to take place in August of 63. And he said, we have to find a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy. Malcolm was calling for a unification of the civil rights leaders and their followers. Now, this is why he's still in the Nation of Islam. All right. Now, Dr. King didn't respond. But we do know that, one, Malcolm meets with Coretta Scott King in early 1965. He goes to Selma. He wants to meet with Dr. King. Dr. King's in jail. Okay. And this is during the Selma to Montgomery campaign. Malcolm meets with Coretta Scott King. We also know that in February of 1966, Dr. King meets with Elijah Muhammad. Dr. King and Coretta Scott King go to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's house in Chicago, and Dr. King meets with Elijah Muhammad. And Dr. King and Muhammad Ali had a friendship as well. And there's an interview that they did together in 1967, and there's a clip of it from the Associated Press on YouTube. And I showed this in some of my lectures. And they're talking about, it's right after the interview, it's right after the meeting that they had. They talk about their opposition to the Vietnam War. They talk about how they do see eye to eye on a number of issues, but disagree on other issues. And Muhammad Ali says at the end of that interview, he said, we're still brothers. And he puts his arm around Dr. King. On page 133 of Dr. King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Dr. King praises the Nation of Islam. This book right here. He praises the Nation of Islam on their ability to instill pride in African Americans, their ability to get African Americans off of drugs, things like this. He said he disagreed with some of their views about white people, things like this. But in this book, his last book came out in 1967, page 133. He praises the Nation of Islam. Why aren't we taught about any of this stuff, or most of it? Why aren't we taught about this? There has always been a concerted effort from the 1% or 5% to divide African Americans, to keep us divided, keep us fighting against one another. Okay, because they understand that if we all united, as Lil Flip said, game over. So there's always a concerted effort to keep us fighting against one another. But they understood that we had to unite. They understood that we had to put those differences aside. When Malcolm leads the Nation of Islam, there was a meeting, the documentary Make It Plain. The documentary Make It Plain about Malcolm X. They talk about a meeting that took place in the documentary. They said it was Juanita Portier's house, which was one of Sidney Poitier's wives. Professor James Small, who knew Malcolm, he told me it wasn't at Juanita Portier's house. It was somewhere else, but the meeting took place. It was the leading civil rights leaders. Dr. King couldn't make it. He did send a surrogate. It was a meeting with Malcolm X so that they could put all their differences on the table and work together. Why aren't we taught about this?
Okay. When was that again?
That was it had to be 1964. It's after Malcolm leads the Nation of Islam. The documentary Make It Plain is on YouTube. They talk about this meeting that took place after Malcolm left. Because I told you, Malcolm joins the Nation of Islam. Malcolm joins the civil rights movement when he leads the Nation of Islam. Now, PBS.org, public broadcasting system, they have a good piece here that deals with Malcolm and the civil rights movement. Malcolm and the civil rights movement. And they talk about Malcolm changing his tone on the civil rights movement. He comes out in support of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay. Now, he is not sure if they can get everything enforced that is on that they're proposing, but he said he agrees this is something that's definitely needed and more. But in here they talk about I want to see if I can find that piece there, but they deal with this in the documentary Make It Plain, the meeting that took place. And the other thing is, like I said, a lot of people don't know that Dr. King met with Elijah Muhammad February 24th, February 1966. The Nation of Islam on their website, NOI.org, they have an article about that, and they have the picture of the two meeting. Okay, so if we had a better understanding of Dr. King, Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Muhammad Ali, put aside their differences, okay, generally speaking, they realized that African Americans had to unite. Marcus Garvey, okay, we understood that we had to put aside our differences and unite. And as Malcolm put it, he said we have to find a common solution to a common problem posed by a common enemy. There was an article, I'll pull it up, and you can go to the next topic if you want. But
yes.
there was an article from
too, Michael. You can share your
okay. Okay, I'm gonna pull up this article here from the Washington Post, and I talk about it usually each year. This deals with the day Dr. King met Malcolm X. Okay, and it's written by Deneen L. Brown for the Washington Post, January 14, 2018. Deneen L. Brown writes some really, really good articles. What I do, click on present.
Yes.
I think okay, present, because I use Restream, so I've only used StreamYard a few times. Okay, screen sharing. Okay, share screen. Okay, let's try this here. And this talks about when they met. So the all the pictures that you see of the two of them together, that is from March 26, 1964. Okay,
yeah, you have to hit present.
Okay, let me see. Your browser is about. Let me see. Let me try this again. Share screen, and screen sharing is easiest with two monitors. Okay, screen sharing. Okay, just click on share screen, and it should say, oh, okay, button says StreamYard Mozilla. I think I need StreamYard Mozilla. Okay, I think this is it here.
There you go.
Okay, sharing the screen. Okay, there we go. What am I doing wrong? It's showing it. Okay, it's showing it. Hold on, I'm doing something wrong. But that's the article there. Maybe you could pull it up. I could post it here. Maybe you could pull it up on the screen.
Yeah, if you post it, I can pull it up.
Yeah, but this article here, Malcolm said, so it was March 26, 1964, U.S. Senate debate over the Civil Rights Act of 64. Malcolm tells Dr. King, I'm throwing myself into the heart of the civil rights struggle. I'm throwing myself into the heart of the civil rights struggle. And this is what Malcolm does. They were trying to meet again in 1965, but Malcolm was assassinated February 21st, 1965. Basically, the month after he, I think it was January 65, he meets with Coretta Scott King. He's assassinated the next year. But if we really studied the trajectory of both of their lives and then understand history after they're assassinated, because the party realignment between the two major political parties is completed in 1968 with the election of Richard Nixon, who runs on largely an anti-civil rights platform. He runs on a platform against spending billions of dollars against the war on poverty. He runs against the rebellions taking place across the country, like Detroit Rebellion, 1967, things of this nature, Newark, New Jersey, and not wanting to deal with the root cause of the rebellions as well. Richard Nixon runs against a backlash of all this and wins 1968. Okay, then is reelected in 1972. All right. So that solidifies the party realignment that began in 1928 with the Lily White movement, which was an effort by the Republican Party to appeal to Southern segregationist Democrats in 5 former Confederate states to get them to vote for Herbert Hoover, the Republican, for president, as opposed to Al Smith, who was the Democratic nominee for president. And he was a moderate Democrat from New York, Al Smith. OK, and what Republicans started doing, they started ignoring the needs and concerns of African Americans. They were ignoring the rise of the Ku Klux Klan that became powerful again in the 1920s, largely because of the movie Birth of a Nation. February 8th, 1915, Birth of a Nation comes out, and the movie rejuvenates the Ku Klux Klan, and the Klan are the heroes of the movie. OK, the Ku Klux Klan. And that movie takes place during slavery, Reconstruction, and post-Reconstruction, during slavery, the Civil War, and the Reconstruction era. All right. And the movie calls Race Riots in the Streets. There's a scene that depicts a black man trying to rape a white virgin. And at the end of the movie, you have a rising up of the Ku Klux Klan to put down a rebellion of former Union Negro soldiers. And it says across the screen that this was the birth of a nation. The Ku Klux Klan starts taking out recruiting ads next to ads for the movie The Birth of a Nation in newspapers. And then in October 1915, the Reverend William Joseph Simmons, he rejuvenates the Ku Klux Klan, which is known as the second incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan, the Reverend William Joseph Simmons. Go research that, because there's an article from the Washington Post that talks about how he created the second incarnation of the Ku Klux Klan after seeing the movie The Birth of a Nation.
Wow. I wanted to bring up a couple of things before we conclude.
Sure.
In light of the fact that it's the birth anniversary of Malcolm tomorrow, just wanted to get your thoughts about what resulted in his assassination. You know, there are some who say that the NOI was in on it. There are some who say that it was Herbert Hoover or J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI and so forth. What are your thoughts about what resulted in the assassination of Brother Malcolm?
Well, the FBI and CIA were definitely involved in it. The Nation of Islam was not involved, meaning Elijah Muhammad didn't give the order or anything like that. We know it was the FBI, CIA, and New York Police Department as well. If we look here, I'm going to give a few sources here because I have a number of them. The assassination of Malcolm X, reaction to the exoneration of 2 men convicted of Malcolm X's murder, November 17th, 2021, from the New York Times. I'm going to give you a few sources here. So we know the 2 brothers were exonerated. There was a cover up, and evidence that would have exonerated them was suppressed at the time of their trials and conviction back in 1965 or so. Muhammad Aziz and Khalil Islam. These were the 2 brothers who were exonerated. We know one of them filed a lawsuit against the New York City, for wrongful conviction. And your question was, you said, what was accomplished? Was that your question, Brother Vince? What was accomplished with his assassination?
I just want to get your take on who was responsible for it. And what I'm getting from you, at least I believe, is that it was actually more so the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover than it was the Nation of Islam, because there is
absolutely.
You know that Louis Farrakhan, Brother Minister Farrakhan, was jealous and all these other kinds of things, and you know, the NOI may have participated in that assassination, but I want the record to be set straight.
Well, the one brother who was a member of the Nation of Islam, not these 2, but the other one, his name escapes me right now. It'll come to me. He admitted that he did it. Okay. And he said the other 2 were not involved in it. Okay. So
was that the guy from Jersey? Was that the guy from Jersey?
No, the one. So there was one. So there was a documentary that came out. Who killed Malcolm X? That really shed light on this, and it caused the Manhattan District Attorney's Office under Cyrus R. Vance to reopen the case. Okay, the guy from New Jersey. So there was one guy who they said was the shotgun man. He was never caught. I'm talking about the one who was actually caught. There were 3 who were arrested and convicted. Okay. 2 of them were not involved in it. Okay. And the one who was arrested and convicted, he said the other 2 were not involved in it. But they were set up, and there was evidence that could have exonerated the other 2 that was suppressed. There was a piece by I'm going to try to pull this up here. There was a piece that talked about how, from the Huffington Post, Hoover hid that some witnesses in Malcolm X assassination trial were FBI informants. Okay, I'm gonna post this here. You all can pull this up. So there's overwhelming evidence of a cover up here, and we know that the New York City Police Department was not present at the Audubon Ballroom like they normally were when Malcolm X gave speeches, things of this nature. And there was a piece from face-to-faceafrica.com, and others have it also. This deals with Eugene Roberts. Okay, the little known story of Eugene Roberts, the Black NYPD secret agent who infiltrated Malcolm X's inner security and the Black Panther Party. Okay, Eugene Roberts. Now, in the I think it's in the second Eyes on the Prize series, the one that deals with like 1965 to the 1980s. If I remember correctly, Eugene Roberts is interviewed in there. Okay, because the second Eyes on the Prize series is even more powerful than the first one. The second Eyes on the Prize series interviews Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. They talk about the Deacons for Defense and Justice. They talk about Malcolm X. Whereas in the first Eyes on the Prize series that deals with history from about 1955, starting with the lynching of Emmett Till, August 28, 1955, through the passing of the Voting Rights Act in 1965. They really don't deal with the armed resistance. They mention Malcolm X about 90 seconds in that first Eyes on the Prize series. That second one gets really deeper into all this. And also it deals with how the civil rights movement was really not a nonviolent movement. And if you read the book by Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr., this book here, this Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed, this deals with the whole history of armed resistance during the civil rights movement. And Professor Charles E. Cobb Jr. Was a field secretary for SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, for 5 years, working in rural Mississippi to organize African Americans to register to vote, and dealing with getting the right to vote. And he said, when they came from the north, went down south. He said, when they first went down there, he said, Black people down south said, we know you're nonviolent, but we're not. And we're not going to let these white people kill you. And he said that whenever they stayed at somebody's house, the African Americans' house down in the south, he said they always had guns. There was a shotgun over the fireplace. There was a gun in the nightstand or something like that, because in the South, you grew up in a gun culture. Oftentimes you grew up on a farm. You have to protect livestock. You have to be able to protect your house. If you're on a farm, if you're on acres of land, right, you usually, you're on the outskirts of town many times. So you don't have a local police force. You have a sheriff, but you don't have a local police force. So you have to be able to defend yourself. So African Americans grew up in a gun culture. You learn how to hunt. If you were a boy, you learn how to hunt. Maybe when you were a teenager, you may get a 22 caliber rifle for your birthday. So this book documents the armed resistance throughout the civil rights movement, even the armed resistance protecting Dr. King when the Deacons for Defense and Justice were providing security for Dr. King. They talk about how there's a situation where you had Thurgood Marshall, and how carloads of black men showed up to protect Thurgood Marshall, and they're armed with guns. You have they talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, how she owned guns. Medgar Evers owned gun. Raymond Parks, Rosa Parks' wife, owned guns. All this. Dr. King owned guns until Bayard Rustin convinced him to get rid of his guns. Dr. King tried to get a concealed pistol license in 1956 from Montgomery, which was the capital of Alabama. This was during the Montgomery bus boycott, and Dr. King's house was firebombed twice in 1956. He tried to get a concealed pistol license, and he was denied a concealed pistol license. It was Bayard Rustin who convinces Dr. King to ultimately give up his guns. And Bayard Rustin makes the case, well, if somebody comes to your house and does something, breaks in, you end up shooting them, you're going to disrail this nonviolent movement. Okay. So ultimately, Dr. King gives up his guns. But the way this movement has been told to us is largely wrong. And Professor James Small, one of our greatest historians and one of my teachers, he told me personally, he said the civil rights movement was not a nonviolent movement. He said it was black people with guns protecting civil rights workers, protecting civil rights leaders, things like this. And he said if it had not been for black people with guns, there would not have been a civil rights movement.
Yes, thank you for that. One other thing that I wanted to get to was Juneteenth. I had promised the folks that we would discuss that. So just wanted to get your thoughts on it. There are some folks who embrace it as a holiday. There are some who say that, you know, it's kind of been exploited and appropriated. What are your thoughts about Juneteenth as we commemorate it here in the United States?
Well, absolutely. First of all, we've been commemorating Juneteenth for decades before it became a federal holiday. In 2022, it became a federal holiday. It passed Congress, finally signed into law by President Joe Biden. It's the only federal holiday that recognizes slavery. The only federal holiday that recognizes slavery. So when I talk about Juneteenth, and people can contact me if they want me to do a virtual presentation for the Juneteenth celebration, what have you, we have to protect the history of Juneteenth and correct the history of Juneteenth. We have to protect the history of Juneteenth and correct the history of Juneteenth. It can become a very powerful celebration, and we can use it to educate Americans on a history that Republicans are passing laws to suppress the teaching of that history in the state legislatures and in their respective states and in public schools. We have to understand history, economics, law, and politics. Number one, Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. Juneteenth commemorates June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger goes into Galveston, Texas to deliver General Order Number 3, saying that those enslaved Africans were freed. And this is after General Robert E. Lee surrenders to Ulysses S. Grant, April 9th, 1865 at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia. Okay. So that effectively ends the Civil War, April 9th, 1865. However, it does not come to an official end till August 1866. Slavery does not officially end until December 18th, 1865, when the 13th Amendment is adopted. Is ratified December 6th, 1865, when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment. Okay, so Kentucky and Missouri, from memory, Kentucky and Missouri, they don't officially end slavery till December 6, 1865. We know that you have people say that this was 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation freed the slaves. No, the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. Go to archives.gov or the Library of Congress and read the Emancipation Proclamation. It tells you that only the slaves in territories of rebellion, or those that were a part of the Confederacy, were freed. Those in the border states, Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware, they were allowed to keep their slaves. Maryland did not abolish slavery till November 1st, 1864, after they put it on the ballot. Okay. So it was not the last day of slavery. And you're going to have some slave owners who keep the information or don't free their slaves to the following year, because it took Major General Gordon Granger and his 2,000 Union troops, most of them African-American men. It took them almost a year to go throughout the entire state of Texas and physically take back Texas under control of the Union. It took military force. There were 250,000 enslaved African people in Texas. They all did not get the word on June 19th. June 19th is the date that was agreed upon to celebrate what happened and celebrate them being free. But all of them were not freed on June 19th. 1, 2, is not the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves. It's going to be the 13th Amendment when it's ratified December 6, 1865, when Georgia ratifies the 13th Amendment, because they had to change the state constitution, ratify the state constitution to end slavery, because slavery was sanctioned by the state constitution. Okay, whether you deal with Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution, which is what ends the international transatlantic slave trade. They say the earliest that they that can end is January 1st, 1808. And that dealt with bringing Africans into the country to enslave them. That played a part in the Amistad case, the United States versus the Amistad, U.S. Supreme Court case of 1841. When you go read that court ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that it was illegal for the Amistad slave ship to come into U.S. waters because the international transatlantic slave trade had been abolished. Well, that goes back to Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution. We know that Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, known as the 3/5 Compromise, and people totally misunderstand that. That wasn't saying black people were 3/5 of a human being. That dealt with how you count them for representation when it came to apportionment, determining how many seats in the House of Representatives does a slaveholding state have. Do you count the full population? Do you count half the population? Okay, the South wanted 100% of the slaves counted because that gave them further dominance in the House of Representatives. Okay, the North is saying, well, wait a second, if you count the full population, that gives you full dominance and you don't even want to recognize they're human. So they're going back and forth trying to determine, do we count 50% of the slave population or what have you? They settled, they compromised and said, we'll count 3/5 of the population. So if Virginia has 100,000 slaves, you're going to count 60,000 when it comes to population to determine how many seats in the House of Representatives Virginia will have. It wasn't saying that this person is 3/5 of a human being. That's a total misunderstanding and not even understanding the argument that's taking place at the Philadelphia Convention in 1787. And then also, just as a footnote, Section 2 of the 14th Amendment, 1868, changed the way the count was taken. So when you read the U.S. Constitution, they have an asterisk there for Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and they say that was corrected by Section 2 of the 14th Amendment of 1868. So this is an opportunity. Juneteenth is an opportunity for us to educate America, because Americans are very, very ignorant of history. There was an article that I sent you all, and it says a new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. Now, this is from Time.com, Time Magazine, January 12, 2022, and it talks about how most Americans don't understand the Reconstruction era and how most states are not teaching it either correctly or not teaching it at all. That's 1865 to 1877. You can't understand America today without understanding the Reconstruction era. So Juneteenth gives us an opportunity to educate America on all this history, but also to tie that to the fight for repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery, racism, Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, housing discrimination, structural inequities, what some people collectively call reparations. Okay. Juneteenth gives an opportunity to educate people on that and fight for all those policies and fight for that agenda. But we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. And we cannot let Juneteenth continue to be co-opted by corporations, white corporations, things of this nature. No, we have to have some integrity. You can't just slap Juneteenth on something and sell it, and you haven't been selling all year, or it hasn't been selling. It's just been sitting on your shelf all year. You slap Juneteenth on it. Now this has something to do with Juneteenth. No, we can't allow that to take place.
Yeah.
I think I lost your signal. Can you hear me? I think you're frozen.
Okay.
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, it's just so important for us to understand history. I like your acronym HELP. Because it keys on those 4 areas that are so vital. And so, yeah, I'm just glad that we're able to shed light on the truth about Juneteenth. And, just like Kwanzaa has been appropriated, you can go to Walmart and get Kwanzaa gear now and other stores. And they have no affinity to what Kwanzaa really stands for, but they stand to profit.
Right.
It's always about the money. Brother Michael, we have gotten a serious lesson today. And as I did last week, I'm going to replay this so that I can
please do.
embellish my notes and try to remember some of the things that you have shared. I want to give you another opportunity to promote the channel. The links that you have shared with us today, I have opened up tabs on my browser so that I can share those.
Right. Okay.
Look at some of them. I couldn't bring up because I guess it was the New York Times or the other publications.
Oh, they have a paywall. Yeah. I have a digital subscription. I spend so much money on digital subscriptions each month for a lot of these news sources here, because some of them aren't free. But so people can visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Follow me on Facebook, The African History Network on Facebook, my personal page, Michael Imhotep, and on YouTube, Michael Imhotep as well, IMHOTEP. And be sure to register for my classes. We have one today, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Even if you can't join us live, you can go back and watch the replay. So the class is on sale right now. And we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. The name of the class is Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade. It's a very visual class. We take you throughout history to understand what happened to us, understand our accomplishments and achievements. And today we're going to continue dealing with some of the history of the Moors, and then we get into Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism by Dr. John Henrik Clarke, to see how all this history is connected. The second class that I teach, it deals with Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Okay. And that class deals with that period of time, that about 168-year period of time. And I had to create that second class because I realized there was so much information that I wanted to cover during that crucial period of time that I had to create a second class so we can get more in depth into that period from 1800 to 1968, 1970. All right. So we have a bundle pack of courses also you can register for, but join us today. I'll give you more information. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. The content is PG-13. You can use this with your children. It's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing, anything like this. This helps us to continue to finance the research, because this is not free to do what I do. It takes a lot of resources to do this and to pay for the services that we need, etc. So this helps us. One of the ways that we're able to finance all this also, because I don't get support from billionaires and foundations and things like that. I don't get that type of support. But thanks, brothers. We get support from you all. So thanks for having me back on.
Definitely, bro.
All right.
Definitely.
Well, Sadiqa is here in Cleveland.
Sadiqa, yeah. And the classes at my own. Yeah, the class is at my online school, so it's not on social media, so people know. That's why you have to register for it. It's at my online school, the African History Network online school.
All right. I was just going to say, Sister Sadiqa lives right around the corner from me, literally. She says she's going to be at your class at 4 o'clock.
Oh, thank you, Sadiqa. Thank you.
Big shout out to her.
Thank you.
And you know what, Brother Michael, in all seriousness,
yes.
What we've got today in the 2 hours and some change that we spent together far exceeds what I got in 12 years of education in the education system when it comes to history. I was asking my history teacher, hey, what about this? What about that? What were Black people doing in the United States in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s? I know about slavery. I know about Reconstruction, but what else is there?
Right. Well, unfortunately,
university. Go ahead.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not sure what period of time this was. Was this in college or high school or elementary school? When was this?
I'm a child of the 70s. I was in high school in the 70s and entered the university in 1975 and exited in 1980 and vowed that I would not return because the banking concept of education that Dr. Edward W. Crosby bequeathed to us in the Department of Pan-African Studies at Kent State University back then. But you know, I am mindful and aware of the fact that education is a lifelong process, and really, truly, the most significant education that you receive happens when you leave school.
Yeah. Well, some of those teachers previously, 70s, 60s, things like that, some of those teachers didn't know that history themselves. And some of them may have been African American as well. What we did see in the 1960s, and we saw this at Howard University, and the second series of Eyes on the Prize deals with this, is the fight for Black studies programs at universities, at HBCUs, things of this nature. And then in the late 1980s, 89, going to 90, 91, we also saw a fight on university campuses for Africana studies programs, like the fight we saw here in Detroit at Wayne State University, which is why you have an Africana studies program at Wayne State University. It came because of protests. So, and we also saw when we attempted to have African-centered curriculums in independent schools and charter schools here in the U.S. in the late 80s, early 90s, we saw that come under attack as well. Okay, so we have to, the need for African-American history is extremely important. Dr. Carter G. Woodson understood this. He said that our history had to be taught in every school across the country. Whether you call it African-American history, Africana studies, whatever, that history has to be incorporated, has to be taught. And we also have to fight back on those attempts to suppress that history as well. Like we see in the legislatures, in Florida, in other state legislatures, the anti-critical race theory laws that we see, Oklahoma, Georgia, things of this nature, they are attacking in various ways the teaching of that history because they understand that right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. And and one of the things that they fear also is if white children understand what happened in this country, you're going to have white children rebelling and fighting back against the establishment as well, because the George Floyd protest that took place, it was interracial. It wasn't just African Americans out protesting. It was white people out protesting, white teenagers, things like this. And that protest went global. Okay. And a lot of things were connected. So people are saying, well, wait a second, the civil rights movement, the modern day civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s, you had participation from white people in that protest and things like this. And they're saying, hold on, we need to attack the information source that will properly educate them on this history that happened, while at the same time be able to, through law, suppress their ability to vote to change the future. Those attacks on the history and voting rights are not separate. They're combined. Okay. When you can control people's access to information about understanding the past and control their ability to vote to create law and impact law that determines the future, right? I'm telling you, they're trying to wipe us off the political chessboard. That's why the November 2024 election is so important. Presidential election, yes, but also state legislature, governor, city council, mayor, all this is connected. So this is extremely important. I tell people right now it's correct wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you've been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So right now it's correct wrong behavior. Wakanda forever. It's not over till we win.
Yeah. Antonio, if you want to give us the saying that Dr. Qua David Whitaker gave us that you started the show with every Saturday with, give that to us right now.
I'm sure you got that from. I mean, what you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself, and what you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself, and what you know of yourself depends on what you've been told of yourself.
Yes, and then that's where Runoko Rashidi, I think, got it from, because Runoko told me about that. That's where I get my saying from. I'm modified. I got that from Runoko. Yes.
Yeah. Runoko got it from Qua David Whitaker here in Cleveland. Not a Kwame of the second.
Yes.
We're so put together. Blessed. I think they collabed a little bit and got it together.
Yes. All right. Well, Brother Michael, once again, congratulations to you on the success of the channel.
Thanks, brother.
Keep doing what you do. You've definitely got a bevy of students, and you can include me in that bevy of students right now.
All right. Absolutely. Everybody register for our online classes, and you can watch them on demand also. You don't have to join us live in class, and you can ask questions in class also with the live text chat also. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Thank you, brothers.
All right.
Appreciate
Take care,
you,
my
brother.
brother.
Good
All right,
job,
Hotel.
man.
Take care. Thank you.
Peace.
Peace. Now, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network a few ways. Be sure to register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. This is a 10-week class. We're doing more than 10 weeks this time around. Next classes are Saturday, May 4th, Saturday, May 11th, Saturday, May 18th, and Saturday, May 25th, 2024, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Click right here to register here for the class. The class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it any time. So a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. We have the lesson plan here for the entire course also already laid out, so you can look at the content that we cover. We deal with 80 to 100 articles, and I put together this class. I've been teaching this class on and off since 2017. Okay, I've been studying history 34 years now. Do lectures across the country. Been hosting the African History Network show 14 years, but we look at there's over 200 slides that I put together, 80 to 100 articles that we'll go through and look at. The 15 books that we reference. You don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class. I'll show you excerpts of the books on the screen usually. And we look at video clips of interviews I've done with historians like Professor James Small, Professor Kabahai Wafakamane, Anthony Browder, who wrote Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, which is one of the books we use in the class, Runoko Rashidi, who wrote Black Star, The African Presence in Early Europe, which is another book that we use in the class, okay? So you can register for this. This content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Okay, and we'll post the link here. The link's in the thread of this broadcast. And you can support us through PayPal and Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me /the AHN show. So we have the information right here on the website as well. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These are fake African History Network Cash App accounts here that have been stealing money from us. There are a few other ones out there I've identified. I'm still trying to get them shut down. You can click right here on our link and it shows our QR code, okay, for Cash App. This helps us stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay some of the bills, etc.